Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon from the Bat Cave. It is, let's see, I think it's Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. And I'm going to pick up in the Samuel series, keep going on from the period of the Judges. I'm going to try to take you guys probably today to about Samuel 7, which is where, well, actually it might be Samuel 8 or 9. But it's where they get to the point where they don't want any more judges and they want a king. And that's going to officially close the period of the judges. And then we're going to probably look at all of Saul's, or Saul, from the point of Saul being chosen to David being chosen in one section. And then we'll go from there. So later on this week, I'm probably going to do an eschatological review / update. It's been a while since I did an eschatological recording, and there's been a lot that's been going on since I last did one. Obviously, you see Russia, Iran, and Turkey all talking about going after Israel for invading, basically taking out Hezbollah and Hamas leaders and invading southern Lebanon. So we're looking at the Gog Magog and war getting pulled in, and I'm going to tell you exactly what the Bible says and what I predict is going to happen, which so far I have not been wrong once on my predictions of what's going to happen geopolitically as it relates to prophecy since around 2006. Everything's been going as, my studies have taken me to the conclusion that it's going to go, and I basically just have a Bible and background in social studies. So I want to keep going with that, and I want to make sure I'm regularly repeating the things I say and updating the things I say, not so that, I grow my own popularity or anything like that, but so that you guys become more confident that the Bible is true, it's predicting these things, and then you can take these sound bites and pieces of information and show them to people and say, the Bible is predicting this. This guy's been telling us for years the Bible is predicting us. He said this was going to happen, then it happened. He said this was going to happen, and it's going to happen, to show that the source of the prediction is not me, but the Scripture. And that somebody who's consistently just telling you what the Scripture says is going to happen is proving accurate, because there's just not a lot of people who are doing that, okay? The best people I know in terms of eschatological students are falling under the persuasion of pre-wrath and the Islamic Antichrist theory and merging Gog Magog with Armageddon and falling under Jewish and Islamic eschatological theories. And there's just not a lot of futurists doing a great job right now. So anyways, I'm going to walk you guys through this chapter, Benjamin, and then I'm going to this chapter of Samuel, and then I'm going to try to do that eschatological broadcast by Saturday or Sunday. So hope you guys are doing well. Let's look at Samuel now. If you remember, Samuel is somebody who we believe would have written the book of Judges and probably pulled Joshua together. Joshua was probably a personal family record of the house of Joshua. It might even be the book of the wars of the Lord, as I told you guys, because the things that Moses tells Joshua to write in the book of the wars of the Lord, Joshua accounts at the end of Joshua. So if Joshua is really about Jesus defeating the enemies of Israel and helping them take the promised land, then that would make sense, because Joshua and Jesus are the same name. So Joshua might very well be the book of the wars of the Lord. So I wanted to point that out, because that might be one more book in terms of an extra biblical mysterious writing that we don't need to look for. Then you have Samuel pulling in everything together, probably from Judges, with the exception of the story of the Danites and the story of the Benjamites. Those clearly seem to be added after. And then, of course, Ruth. Those seem to be added from different sources after the captivity. And the story of the Benjamites was probably with the priesthood, because you have Phinehas' son kind of leading I think you actually have Phinehas. It's either Phinehas or his son leading the charge on that, and Phinehas takes him into the promised land. I think it's Phinehas when he's an old man. And so that would have been kept by the priesthood. The story of the Danites probably would have been kept by some prophet. We don't really know exactly who, because the Danites are gone by the time they get to the captivity. There's Danites in Dan who get taken away, but after that, We don't have any Danites. So where the record of how the Danite cult started comes from probably a prophetic source, I would imagine. And then Ruth probably comes from the house of David. Okay, so those things are getting pulled together from records of probably Jews in the dispersion, and then those are collected ultimately by Ezra and Nehemiah, and that's when they probably finish off Judges. So again, Samuel's going to be a major figure in the Old Testament. He's going to be the first real authoritative. I mean, he's working under the priesthood, but he's a prophet, and he is going to close off the period of Judges, begin the period of Kings, and also begin the period of prophets who are kind of keeping track of the kings and what goes on. Okay, so so it's really about if you think about 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, which closes with words that are also in Jeremiah. So we kind of know that Jeremiah probably closes the book of Kings. This period from Samuel to Jeremiah is really the period of prophets and kings. And I've thought about doing something like when I'm done with my apostles' teaching, maybe doing something called on the prophets and kings, to put these books in order with the prophets interspersed with them, like I'm doing with my New Testament. I may do something like that at some point in time, and then I may do another book that is like the post-exilic writing. So Daniel, Ezekiel kind of start that post-exilic phase, and then just takes you. Chronicles is written during that time. Ezra, Nehemiah is written during that time, and Malachi, and that's going to include Zechariah, Haggai, Daniel, Ezekiel, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Malachi. So I might do those 2 books and just kind of put those things in order and tell the story around that, so that makes sense to you. But the Bible does a pretty fair job with these things and keeping them in order. If you just look for the main points where these things kind of align with Scripture, you just need to know that the major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, are in chronological order. And then the minor prophets, Hosea on down to Malachi, are in chronological order. And you can kind of use some pretty good guesswork to figure out about when these prophets prophesied. So anyways, back to Samuel. We're going to start on Samuel 1. It says, there's a man from Ramoth Zophim of Mount Ephraim. His name is Elkanah, the son of Jerome, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. Okay. This term Ephrathite, we're going to find this word translated Ephraimite and Ephrathite depending on your translation. This could mean it makes sense if he's called of Mount Ephraim and then called an Ephraimite, because he's not an Ephraimite, he's a Levite. Okay, he might have been from the city of Ephrathah though, which I think Bethlehem of Ephrathah would have been one of those Levite cities, and that might be where he's from. Because we're going to come across Jeroboam later on. It's that same word as Ephrathi, which seems to be an Ephrathite, and that would make him either from the city of Ephrath, which I think is what they were calling Bethlehem before it was Bethlehem. I think. Okay, or it might be. Or it might be somebody who's actually descended from the lineage of Judah. So that would make them kind of like a distant cousin to David. So Jeroboam, the first king of northern Israel, could be that distant cousin to David. But we know this Elkanah is actually descended from Korah. So if you remember Korah's rebellion and how his sons kind of skedaddled before his tent and his family get swallowed alive into hell. Basically, some of those are going to grow up to be singers, and the Korahites, and one of those Korahites is going to be Joel, who is going to be mentioned in Samuel. He's one of Joel's son, who is Samuel's grandson. So Samuel is a Korahite, and his descendants are going to be some of the singers, the sons of Korah that are singing. So he's a Levite. We know this for certain. This Elkanah is the son of Jeroboam. This is all in the book of Numbers. And then it says he has 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of the city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And his 2 sons, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. So these three, we're going to show how these guys are wicked. You're not going to find them accounted in later lists of the priests because they're actually blotted out. This is the Old Testament version of being blotted out of the book of the living. If you're especially wicked and your line is cut off because of your wickedness, because of a judgment by the Lord, you're actually cut off from the genealogical record. So obviously not all these genealogical records are meant to be strict chronologies so we can keep track of time. They're meant to be so we can keep track of ancestry, but they would cut out people who were especially wicked from those ancestries. And that is a version of, because remember that the whole idea of keeping these records and these ancestries is to keep track of who Messiah would come from. And so you're going to find these things kept in the priesthood, because that's really important because they inherit the priesthood, and they're ultimately going to join the line of Christ. And then in the Davidic house, because they're the house of David, and they're ultimately going to join the line. But this tradition would have gone all the way back to Shem, and so the idea of your line being cut off. This is why the Levirate law was so important. If your line's cut off, we know the Messiah is not going to come from you, so there's no point in keeping track of your line anymore, right? Nor is it really important to keep track of where that line came from, because that branch of the family tree is no longer going to be relevant. Whereas if those people aren't cut off, if they maintain relatives, through the Levirate custom, they're all potentially a line that's going to produce Messiah one day, so it's important that they keep their records. And that's why it was really important to Israel, and when they come back in the Promised Land under Chronicles, they need to be able to demonstrate where their records come from, otherwise they're not going to be in the priesthood, and they're not going to inherit land, okay? So the aristocracy there, it's not just about nobility and land rights, it's about who the Messiah is going to come from, because remember, anybody in Israel, because of the Levirate custom, let's say everybody dies. Let's say every single person in Israel dies, but some guy from Reuben, right? Well, that Reubenite, by Levirate custom, could produce that next seed in the line of Judah through the Levirate custom, okay? So it's important for everybody to just keep track of their genealogy, because they could be the nearest next of kin, okay? So anyways, now when the time that Elkanah, let's see, he says, so Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there, and at the time that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all the sons and her daughters portions. But to Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb, and her adversary also provoked her sore to make her fret, because the Lord had. And as he did so year by year, when he went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. So I'm sorry, it does say the adversary is the other wife, is just talking crap because she ain't having no babies, okay? And she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah to her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? Let's not talk backwards like Yoda. Let's read something more modern. Why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat of the doorpost of the temple of the Lord, and she was deeply distressed and prayed before the Lord and wept bitterly. She made a vow, O Lord of hosts, if you would only look at the misery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, I will give to your servant a male child, then I will set him before you as a Nazarite until the day of his death. He will neither drink wine or intoxicants, nor shall a razor cut his head. And she continued praying before the Lord, and Eli observed her mouth. Now, it's interesting because this is right after the story of Samson. And this is what happened to Samson's mother, which would have been a pretty known story. Samson was obviously famous. I mean, he killed a whole lot of Philistines, right? And his mother basically says, she's barren, and the angel of the Lord comes to her and says, I'm going to give you a son, but he's going to be a Nazarite for the rest of the life. No razor is going to touch his head. And she seems to be basing on that story, saying, Lord, if you give me a kid too, I'll make him a Nazarite and he'll be dedicated unto you, like a next Samson almost. So she seems to be acting in faith according to one of the most recent judge and how he came about. Okay, so it says, as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. Now drunk in the spirit, charismatic, everybody speaks in tongues people are going to take advantage of passages like this to try to make it sound like, look, you have drunk and she's praying silently. That's because she's praying in tongues, just like in Acts 2, okay? This is not that. It very clearly says what she's saying in her known language. She's just praying silently, okay? He thinks she's drunk because her mouth is moving, but he's not hearing any sound come out. She's just praying silently, okay? So Eli said to her, how long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring my soul before the Lord. Now do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time. Then Eli answered, go in peace. The God of Israel grant you petition you have made to him. And she said, let your servant find favor in your sight. And then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. She feels better. She poured out her heart to the Lord. She's kind of, maybe I'll get something like Samson's mom got. We'll see. But she's feeling optimistic. Okay. And then they rose in the morning and worshiped before the Lord, and they went back to their house of Ramah, and Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So just so you know, when you're talking about the timeline of Samson and Samuel, this is right around the time that Samson is getting famous. Okay, this is when this takes place. So it's almost like she hears the story of Samson, and she immediately goes to God and says, I'll make my kid a Nazarite if you'll let him, and no razor will touch his head if you give me a male child. It's almost like she's pleading for the exact thing that Samson's mom got, which is interesting because Samson is a Danite and he's a Levite, and it's almost like a Antichrist then Christ type, if you will. Because you have two barren women who bear a child naturally. Okay, so let's see here. So I would estimate that the whole time Samson is judging Israel he probably is just starting to judge Israel when she's having this prayer, because I'm spitballing that it was up until Samuel was probably a teenager that Samson's whole deal is going on. Okay, so Samson probably just started getting famous, and obviously he's killed a bunch of Philistines. They know about him in Judah, word's traveling, right? And he's probably just headed off to have his 20 years of adventures, which I'm presuming is involved with the Danites that are sailing among the Greeks. And then during that time, we know about this guy who killed a bunch of Philistines with a jawbone and a donkey. Where did he come from? Oh, his mom was barren, and then this angel of the Lord said, I'm going to give you a child, but he's got to be a Nazarite. And so she's like, I will make my child a Nazarite tomorrow if you give me a child, so that my rival will stop talking crap. So Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him of the Lord. And the man Elkanah and all his household went up to offer for the Lord a yearly sacrifice and pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her son, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and remain there forever, and I will offer him as a Nazarite for all time. So he is almost like the replacement for Samson, which is kind of interesting. Her husband Elkanah said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed the son until she weaned him. And she had when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, and along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, a skin of wine. And she brought them into the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli, and said, O my Lord, as you live, O my Lord, I am a woman who is standing here in your presence praying for the Lord. Now, they straight up slaughtered a bull as a sacrifice rather than dedicating this kid in a normal way. That would have been an expensive offering to kind of dedicate a child, okay? So it says, for this child I prayed, and for the Lord has granted me the petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. She left him there for the Lord. Hannah prayed and said, my heart exalts the Lord. My strength is exalted in my God. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in my victory. There was no one like our Lord, no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, and those who are hungry are fat with spoil. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich, and brings low. He brings low. He also exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts up the needy from the ash heap. He makes them sit with princes and inherit the seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful one, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might does one prevail. The Lord, his adversary, shall be shattered. The Most High will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to the king and exalt the power of his anointed. So you can see a lot of very messianic stuff coming out of her mouth after she has Hannah. It's almost like again, you have in Samson and in him almost like an antichrist preceding Christ type thing, where she is saying a lot of things that are similar to Mary when she gets pregnant, right? But she's saying there's no rock like our God. She's saying he will exalt and empower his anointed. She's talking about him going down into Sheol and coming back out. Like, she's prophesying here. To make no mistake, she is full of the Holy Spirit, and she is prophesying messianic things, of which her Samuel is a foretype. Okay. So it says, then Elkanah went home to Ramah, while the boy remained to minister to the Lord in the presence of the priest Eli. Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord or for the duties of the priests of the people. When anyone offered a sacrifice, the priest's servants would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand. Remember, it was a very specific ordinance in the Levitical code that the fat portions belong to the Lord. You do not eat the fat. You do not drink blood. And so what they would do is they would drain the blood from the neck of the stuff. They would boil it to make sure you're getting all the blood out of it. And then they would roast it, okay? Then they would roast it and burn off all the fat portions. And once the fat portions are burned off, what is left over, unless it's a whole burnt offering, what is left over belongs to the priest. And they're eating lean brisket, okay? Maybe it's not brisket. I don't know. I don't know my meats that well. But anyways, says he would thrust his 3-pronged fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and all that the fork brought up the priest would take for himself, so that they did at Shiloh when all the Israelites came there. So they're taking of the Lord's snacks, and he does not like people. So when I was a kid, my dad used to literally cut off fat on meat and just fry it up in the pan and eat it. He was like a tall, skinny guy, so he played basketball all the time, so he didn't care about getting fat. But he just used to love gristle and stuff, and it's like, he'd give you a piece, and he's like, "Isn't that good?" And you're just like, "Yeah." And all my bad eating habits come from my dad. He would fry cheese and just eat fried cheese. But it's like dad gets the main cut. Like when mom is cooking dinner, and the big steak and the big cut on the turkey or whatever goes to dad. Why? Because he made this. He provided this, right? And it's like a kid taking dad's portion. Like, I'm going for the main breast. I realize dad bought it and mom cooked it, but I'm taking the best stuff for me, right? And this is what they're doing to God, okay? So it's like, moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest servants would come and say to the one who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." Okay, so they're not even boiling it. They want an American medium rare, blood still in it steak with the fat and the gristle, all that good stuff. Corn fed. They want to get high cholesterol and die of a heart attack like a good American. And if the man said to him, let them burn the fat first, and then you can take whatever you wish, because the law demands that, they would say, "No, give it to me now, or I'll take it by force." Okay, so they weren't just careless; they were thuggish. They were violent, and it gets worse. Thus the sin of the young man was very great in the sight of the Lord, for they treated the offerings of the Lord with contempt. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. His mother used to make for him a little robe each year when they went up to their husband to offer yearly sacrifices. And Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord repay you with children and this woman for the gift she has made to the Lord." And then they would return to their home. And the Lord took note of Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. So she's going to have 5 more kids. Kind of like Jesus's mom after Jesus is born. Remember, he's got 4 brothers, and he's got sisters too, so at least 2. Okay, so it's almost like Jesus' mom has a bunch of kids after she gives that miracle child, right? And the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons were doing in Israel and how they lay with the people and the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is not of good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading around." So he knows his sons are bad, okay? But he's going to be a passive dad, like a lot of passive dads who just let their wicked sons grow wicked and not do anything about it. Well, remember, they are your heirs. They are working under your authority. Cut them off. Cut them off. And if you've got Levites who can pull weight and use force, like my sons are wicked. So what does the Bible say? Stone these people to death. You're the one with the authority to execute the law. So he's being disobedient. It's not just his sons, okay? And if one person sins against another, can someone intercede? Someone can intercede for the sinner with the Lord, but if someone sins against the Lord, who can make intercession? In other words, you're the one who's supposed to be making intercession for the people, and you're sinning against the Lord. Who could possibly intercede for you? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to kill them. So notice that they had become so hardened at this point that God's like, nope, you're done. So this context of God hardening somebody to the point where it's like, okay, you're done. You've crossed a line with the Lord that he is no longer going to allow you to repent, is consistent. Did it with Pharaoh. He's now doing it with this dude. Okay, he does it with Judas. He's going to do it with the Jews who killed Jesus in 70 AD. He's very consistent in this. You can cross a line where you know you're doing wrong and you're willfully disobedient. You're not being stupid. You're not even being impulsive. David did stupid, impulsive things. You have very clear understanding that what you're going to do is evil, and you persist in it even after you've gotten away with it and people are still warning you. Okay, David, when he finally gets called out, he immediately repents, because he's not about to be like harden his heart and just be like, get rid of that prophet, kill him. Other people are going to do stuff like that. Okay, like Ahab. Okay, so now the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and favor with the Lord and with the people, and the man of Eli said to him, "Thus the Lord said, I revealed myself to the family of your ancestor in Egypt when they were slaves to the house of Pharaoh." So he's saying God came to Eli and said to him, okay? Now remember, he's the high priest. He's also a judge. He also moves in prophecy. And this is interesting. He moves in prophecy, and yet Samuel's going to prophesy over him. So this is an indication you can move in the gift of prophecy like Saul, like Balaam, like we would assume Judas, right? He's doing supernatural things, maybe not prophecy. But you can move in the gift of prophecy and then become spiritually blind, because even though just because you move in the gift of prophecy, and I'm talking about a Christian or potentially a non-Christian like Balaam, right? The Holy Spirit can move on you to move in prophecy. And after that, this is no indication that I'm sealed with the Holy Spirit and I'm good for life, okay? After that, you can then apostatize. So don't assume any kind of spiritual gift proves I have the Holy Spirit, I can't lose my salvation. Okay? Don't assume that at all. We have examples in the Old and New Testament of that not being the case. Okay? So now, thus the Lord has said, I revealed myself to the family of your ancestor in Egypt when they're slaves in the house of Pharaoh. I chose them out of the tribes of Israel to be my priests, to go up to my altar, to offer incense, to wear an ephod before me. I gave to the family of your ancestor all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. When they took with a greedy eye at my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded you, and honor your sons more than fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of the people in Israel, you stole my gristle. Then the Lord said to the God of Israel declares, I promise that your family and the family of your ancestors, so he's talking about Phinehas, should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me. For those who honor me, I will honor me, and those who despise me will be treated with contempt. So he's not overthrowing the promise he made to Phinehas. He's overthrowing the promise he made to his descendants. Okay, so he's going to take another descendant of Phineas in his place. He's going to do the same thing with the line of Solomon. That's why Jesus comes through Nathan, Solomon's older brother. Okay, it's not because there wasn't a Judah in the line, or there wasn't someone from the house of Solomon in the line that could have worked, because Joseph was from that line. But that line was cursed. Okay, it was the line all the way back to Solomon, because the problem starts with Solomon and it goes all the way forward. So God basically cuts off that line from the Messiah's carnal, fleshly origin, and traces it all the way back to Nathan instead. And he's going to do the same thing with Eli, and he's going to be replaced eventually with the line of Zadok. Okay, so it's Zadok still a descendant of Phineas, but this guy, the line of Eli, is cut off. Okay, so he says, "See, a time is coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your ancestors' families, so that no one in your family will live to an old age." Okay, so he's cutting them off back a ways. Now, where does this go? Well, it doesn't go all the way back to Phineas, because he made a promise of Phineas based on Phineas's righteousness. So it's somebody else apart from this line, but is ultimately descended from Phineas, and that's going to be Zadok. Then in distress you will look with a greedy eye on all the posterity that will be bestowed upon Israel, and no one in your family will ever live to an old age. Okay, because he's going to have another kid that doesn't die. But as a testimony against this wicked priestly line, he's going to make sure that everybody in this family line from here on forward dies young. They're going to lose the office of the high priesthood, but they're still going to be priests. They're still going to serve in the ministerial capacity, but they're going to be cut off, okay, at a young age. And you're going to see this curse on this family line as a testimony that this is what happens when you mess with God's office, okay. The only one of whom whom I shall not cut off from my altar will be spared to weep out his eyes and grieve with his heart. All the members of your household will die by the sword. So I'm going to kill everyone in your family but one guy, and then that one guy, for all generations, his family's going to die young. That's a huge testimony you want to keep track of in the Bible. That's not some small thing he's doing, okay? The fate of your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be assigned to you. Both of them shall die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, and shall do according to all that is in my heart and mind. I will build him a house, and it shall go in and out before my anointed one forever. For everyone who is left in your family shall implore for him a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and shall say, please put me in one of the priest's places that I may eat a morsel of bread. In other words, you guys are going to have to beg for jobs in the priestly service to do anything so that you can earn a living and eat some food. They had the high priesthood, and the high priesthood didn't have to do anything but the sacrifices. Okay, there were other priests and other families assigned to do other things. Now that's removed for them, and they're going to have to beg a job off of one of these other people. Okay, just want to check something real quick. Now in the King James it says, there came a man of God unto Eli. In the New Revised Standard, there says a man of God came to Eli and said, okay, so I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. God didn't come to Eli. A prophet came to Eli. So we don't know who this prophet is. Some unknown prophet came to Eli. Just want to make sure I made a mistake there. So it says, now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. So we know the word of the Lord was rare, but when Samuel was probably a little kid, let's say he's like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, some prophet came to Eli and said, you and your family are toast one day. Okay? Now Samuel is going to be, he's going to be like a young boy, like probably like 12 years old, something like that. Okay? He says, at that time Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in a room. So remember, he's already an old man when he judges. Okay, he is the high priest. He's an old man, and he gets Samuel when Samuel is a little kid. He's going to have Samuel until Samuel's like a adult, not quite middle aged, but like probably in his 30s. Okay. So he's going to live for a while, even though he's old. He's going to die when he's like in his 90s. But when he dies, they all die. Okay? So he says, the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple where the ark of God was, and Samuel was called, and he said, here I am. And he ran down to Eli, and he said, here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, lie down again. So he went down and lay down. So Samuel called again, Samuel, Samuel, and he got up and went down to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, my son, lie down again. So there's another interesting pattern I just kind of picked up on. You have him very much like Jesus. You remember how Jesus is kind of like, he's out of sight, and then he comes back into Israel when he's like a 2-year-old. Well, Samuel comes back after he's weaned. Then it says Jesus grew in stature after he has this incident with his parents when he's like 12. Well, now he's like 12, and he's bringing the word of the Lord to the high priest, okay? So you do have kind of a similar pattern of him having these milestones as he gets older, and when he takes over for Phineas, he's about Jesus' age when Jesus does his ministry. So it's interesting. So as the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and said to Eli, here I am for you. You called me. And he said, I did not call you, my son, go lie down again. And then Samuel did not know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him, so he's never prophesied or anything before. He's still a kid. And the Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got up and went to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. And Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, go lie down, and if he calls you, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel lay down to his place. So I want to see something here. Samuel, or Shemuel, means heard of God. I want to see what Samson means. Shimshon means, comes from the Hebrew shebesh, means be brilliant. The sun, by implication, the east, figuratively, the ray. This is interesting. Rising westward. Rising plus westward. So this is interesting. They are a Christ and Antichrist type. He is a sun. He is a brilliant, shining sun. This is Samson. This is what his name means, that rises in the west. Okay? So the opposite of where the sun goes. Remember, the Antichrist is going to come from the west, up from Egypt, and enter in to Jerusalem and the Holy of Holies from the west. Okay? So Samson's a type of Antichrist, and Samson seems to be a type of Christ, heard by God. Okay? So, or Samson and Samuel, I'm sorry. So, he says, the Lord said to Samuel, so he said, he called his name Samuel, Samuel, he says, speak, your servant hears. And the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I will do a thing in Israel, which both the ears of everyone that hears will tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all the things that I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. So this is all going down real quick, okay? He's like, when I get up off my Thanos throne to do it myself, I'm going to take you all out with a quickness. I'm going to get the Infinity Stones. For I have told him that I will judge his house for all the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained him not. So this is a message to you derelict pastors and fathers who don't exercise church discipline on your professing Christian kids. When the judgment comes, it doesn't just come on the one who's doing the sin. It comes on the one who refuses to carry out their duty to punish the one doing the sin, okay? I have seen churches fall apart because pastors have a passive attitude about church discipline. I've seen them disappear, okay? Well, we're supposed to use grace and blah, 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 and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It starts out with, and this is personal witness, okay? It starts out with lying and stealing in the assembly, people just taking advantage of their fellow brothers and sisters. It grows into fornication. It grows into trannies. It grows into people losing their homes. I've seen all this in a church, okay? It just grows this is all, I'm talking a 10-year span, okay? Grows, and grows until that church that was growing from a Bible study up to 300 people is now back down to 20, 30 people and dead, gone, boom, close the doors. I've seen it happen. Go from a Bible study to having $1 million building to nothing. Because people will not discipline and execute church discipline as God commands. Okay? I've seen other churches, honestly, that don't do it, and they keep growing. Well, they'll exercise church discipline if you come against the pastor or the elders or anything, any false doctrine that's being taught, but they will not exercise church discipline against sin. I've seen other ones who are a mixed bag. Okay, personally, I think if people are doing some things right, some things wrong, I think God is going to have a lot of grace, but He will execute judgments in a church, and I've seen this too, including death. I've seen stuff that's happened. I'm not going to talk that much about it where I'm like, I know why that guy died. I also know it's not always the bad guy who dies. Sometimes it's somebody who's safe to go to heaven dies, and somebody who better get their act together or they won't lives. I've seen all that, okay? I've been a Christian for 20-some years. I've seen a lot of crazy, okay? So, he says, I will fulfill in Eli all I have spoken concerning his house. From beginning to end, I will tell him that I will punish his house forever for the iniquity which he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. They were blaspheming God by eating his snacks. He's basically treating them like he's nothing. Like he's not a real God who likes to eat snacks. He's just an idea. So I can eat his snacks. No. Our God is a real person, and he likes his gristle. So leave the gristle for him, all right? He doesn't have a weight loss problem, so let him have his fat. Therefore, I swear to the house of Eli that Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering forever. Okay, this is RSV. Expiated basically means atoned for. Okay, that's a Catholic word for expiated. Let's see what I've got. New Revised will not be expiated by sacrifice. NASB. Will not be atoned for by sacrifice. That's interesting that atoned for is changed to expiated, new NRSV. Maybe there's a Illuminati Jesuit Catholic conspiracy confirmed about those Bible types. Let's see. Not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. This is bad. This is really bad here, okay? He is not just saying you're cut off, but you can be resurrected in Christ if you repent. He's saying, I have sworn to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. That seems like it includes the blood of Christ. I mean, I'm gonna hope I'm wrong on the side of grace, because Eli does acknowledge his sin, and he's saying he justifies the Lord when the Lord does this. And sometimes that saying, I deserve what I got, is enough to qualify repentance. Okay? So maybe this is just talking about the animal sacrifices that temporarily atone for them. But by sacrifice or offering forever is pretty ultimate. So I would be terrified if I were him. So Samuel laid down, he doesn't weep and grovel and put ashes on his head or anything. He's just like, whatever shall be, que sera, sera. He's just a passive guy. So Samuel lay down in the morning, and then he opened the doors in the house of the Lord, but Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. And Eli, he's walking around, he's like a little kid, and this is basically the guy he lives with / works for. And he's just really skittish around him, you have this look on your face that you really feel sorry for me, or you're really scared for me. What's going on? I really don't want to say, dude. Lord talks to people. Let's just say that sometimes. He's like, yeah, but you're looking at me like you don't want to be around when the lightning strikes. What's going on? So he says, what is the word of the Lord that he spoke to you? And he said, please do not hide it from me. And may the Lord God do so and more also if you hide anything to me of all the words that he's spoken to you. So he's basically cursing him. He's saying, may the curse that the Lord is bringing on me be on you if you don't tell me what the curse is. And he's like, ooh, I'm trying to avoid being part of your curse, so let's not hang around the camp of Korah too long. Okay? So Samuel told him everything He's from the family of Korah. He knows when to get away from somebody who's about to be judged. Okay, he's the son of Korah. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him, and he said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." He's still not really showing remorse or repentance. He's just saying, "Let the Lord do what he feels is right." So I don't get his attitude. He knows what his sons are doing are wicked. He's now being told they're going to be eternally condemned for it. And he's like, let the Lord do what seems good to him. I've been in bad attitude moments where I've had this attitude towards the Lord. But if a prophet were to come to me and say, because of you doing this really obvious sin, that the Bible tells you is really obvious sin, and not repenting of it, you've crossed the line with God. And you are accursed. I would be begging and groveling for blah, blah, blah. But he's crossed that line with God. He's just like, whatever seems good to him, let him do it. He's almost just adopted kind of a fatalistic que sera, sera attitude about everything, right? So Samuel grew in the Lord and was with him, and he let none of his words fail. So Samuel's now an active prophet, okay, since he's like a 12-year-old kid. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord, and the Lord appeared again at Shiloh because the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. Okay, so Shiloh's up here in Ephraim. So this is basically the same place the temple has been since the days of Joshua, still chilling. And it says, thus the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines. So in other words, he's starting to be regarded throughout the whole of Israel as a prophet. Okay, so around this time, he's probably been at this for about 20 years. Okay, maybe 25. So it says, thus the word of the Lord came to all of Israel. Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines and camped beside Ebenezer when the Philistines camped at Aphek. And the Philistines drew up in battle array to meet Israel. And when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men in the battlefield. So they lost in a big way, lost 4,000 dudes. And people came into the camp, and the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us take for ourselves from Shiloh the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that it may come along with us and deliver us from the power of our enemies. Now, wait. When you ask a question, why don't you wait for an answer, bro? You're like, why has the Lord defeated us before our enemies? Pause right there and let me tell you, because you're worshiping Baals and Ashtaroths and stuff like that too. Still, okay? What we need to do is use the Ark of the Covenant like a magic token to try to win like Indiana Jones style, okay? No. It don't work like that. It's not a magic box with superpowers in it. It's not the freaking Tesseract. It's not anything like that, all right? It's not the Indiana Jones melt their face box, all right? It's the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, and sometimes people die when they're around it because the Lord's ticked off. Other times, the Lord's going to say, carry it out and do this thing, and it's not about the box. It's about obedience to the Lord, all right? We don't all just start hitting sticks with rocks and hitting rocks with sticks and expecting water to come out. We don't all just start, walking into the Red Sea and expecting it to split every time, all right? It's not about the formula. It's about obedience to God. Do what God says to do, and if the water's in your way, he'll part it, okay? It's that simple. Do what God says to do, and if the water's in the way, you'll part it, okay? That's why he says if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. What does that mean? It means if God told you, get to the other side of that mountain's in the way, that mountain's going to move, okay? Faith comes from hearing the word of God. It's not this magical juju like the Force that it's like if you just use the Force, you'll move the mountain. It's saying if God's like, I need you to go there and there's a mountain in the way, that mountain will be moved. It'll be cast in the sea, okay? Just do what God says to do, and if there's a sea in the way, it will part. Don't worry about that. Just keep walking forward, okay? But instead they get presumptuous. Like a certain guy who started Christendom and says, if I paint this magical sign on my shield, it will make me win. This is prophetic. You're going to find that this starts with something that Constantine does, And it ends with something just like the bubonic plague, just like Christendom did. Okay? By the time you get to the bubonic plague, that's going to lead to the downfall of Constantinople, because you're going to have basically this plague just wipe out tons of numbers. Okay? They're going to be weakened. The power of the church is going to be weakened, and it's going to lead to the Reformation too, because right after that, John Wycliffe starts speaking out. Okay? And within like 100 years of that, you're going to have the Reformation in full swing. And then you're going to have the 100 Years' War too, and then you're going to have the Constantinople fall, and then you're going to have the Reformation all within about a century of the bubonic plague, which starts with them using the cross like a token like this for war. Okay, it ain't no magic thing. Don't try to turn God's stuff into magic. I adjure you by the power of the cross. Satan loves when you do that. He's even going to let you think that works sometimes. Okay. I see people who use Buddhism and different martial arts stuff like that, and they think it's a magic thing. And sometimes the devil's going to do stuff to support your stupid ritual so that you believe in your stupid ritual instead of obey God. Okay? It's called witchcraft. This is witchcraft. But if they're worshiping Baals and Asherahs, they're all about witchcraft. Okay? They don't understand obedience to God. They don't understand faith. There are people in whom is no faith, says Deuteronomy. So, it says, so the people went to Shiloh, and from there they carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of Hosts, who sits above the cherubim, and the two sons, Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. Okay, now, they needed permission to go take this thing away. Okay, it's not like they just ran in there and took it. These two and their dad, who are toast, he's going to be like, God said I'm cursed and he's going to kill all my sons pretty soon. Well, they want to go take the ark and use it as like a battle token and make the Nazis' faces melt with it. Let's see if that works. And Phineas is going to be like, I'll allow it, because this is just what he's like. He's just a passive fool. And then he says, and they were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God, and the Ark of the Covenant of God came into the camp, and all Israel shouted with a great shout, and the earth resounded. So his kids took it. We need 4 Levites to carry this thing, which means 4 Levites cooperated. Okay. When the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, what does the great noise of the shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean? And they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. And the Philistines were afraid, for they said, God has come into the camp. And they said, woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. See, they're assuming, okay, the story of Jericho, yeah, it's a few hundred years old, but Jericho is still a heap of ruins. Okay, it's a heap of ruins that you can go see, that the walls just fell down from the inside. And as the story goes, as these Jews came in here, these Hopperus, they're calling them, these Hopperus came in here and walked around that city 7 times, and it just fell. We ain't trying to play with their God, okay? But obviously their God isn't with them because they're worshiping our idols, so, maybe we got a shot. And so they're killing them, and then all of a sudden they got their ark again, so they're like, crap, their God is with them. See, they're assuming because the ark is the mercy seat, okay? It doubles as a box that's carrying the Ark of the Covenant and some, it's kind of like a time capsule for some of their old memories. But it's also what the Lord sits on when he sits in the Holy of Holies and adjudicates for the people, okay? That's pre-incarnate Christ doing his deal right there, okay? And so they're assuming, well, it's almost like, 4 guys carrying a bed like that the king would ride on, right? That's kind of like what the Ark of the Covenant is to them. So like, oh crap, they've carried their king, God, their Lord, into the battle array, and now we're not just fighting them, we're fighting their Lord. And they're like, we know about we know about Jericho, even though it was, probably 400 years ago, close to, and we know all about all the other. There's a lot of judges. I mean, Samson just did his thing, right? So Samson has now come and gone since then. So they've had a lot of killing at the hand of people empowered by this God. We're not feeling this God here, okay? So he says, woe to us, who shall deliver us from the hands of these, plural, mighty gods? I want you to understand this. These mighty gods, okay? Now, is that because they're counting the Baals and Ashtaroths that they worship also as gods? possibly. It's possible because the Philistines don't worship Baal and Ashtaroth. They worship Dagon. Okay? And Dagon is like an Aramean Hittite god that they worship. Okay? So this didn't come from Canaan. Remember, they're not Canaanites. They're Egyptians. And their patron god is Dagon. And they don't worship Baal and Ashtaroth. So these people seem to worship Baal, Ashtaroth, and Yahweh. Kind of a corrupt trinity here. Okay? This is kind of weird. Or they understand Father, the Word of the Lord, and the Spirit of the Lord, God, the Spirit of God, and the Word of God as three persons that are one Godhead, and the Philistines are aware that that's how they worship, and they say these gods. Okay, remember when they make the Apis bowl, which is a single thing, they say these are your gods that you worship. Okay, so there seems to be some genuine confusion, whether, and again, it could just be the idolatry, but it could also be that how the Jews describe their God, Gentiles understand as just three gods, three distinct gods. Okay? It's hard to tell, really, because you're going to see this kind of language repeatedly when you hear, actually sometimes Jews too, but also Gentiles, okay, in relation to how they think of God being. Not necessarily how anything that is inspired by God or said by a prophet is said about God, but how people are talking in reference to God seems to reference not a strict idea of a plural oneness, but sometimes just multiple gods. And again, it could be the idolatry, or it could be just bad theology, maybe. So they said, these are the gods who smote the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. So again, they think it's multiple gods who smote the Egyptians. Okay? Take courage and be men, O Philistines, or you will become as slaves to Hebrew, for they have slaves for you, and therefore be men and fight. See, they might also think that the two angels on the mercy seat are gods. Because remember, you've got two visible angels carved into this thing, and they're meant to represent the angels that are over the throne of God, guarding His glory and covering their faces, right? But to them, they might think those are the gods. Like it's just this box with these two gods on it, and these gods are angels, because those would be called teraphim, and teraphim are what are basically idols. Okay. So that might be the case. That might be why they're using the plural God. So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. Oh, so they said, take courage, man. That's all they had to do, is just say, take courage. O Philistines, or you will become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been slaves to you. Therefore be men and fight. Now, this is another thing. If Samson just recently killed the 5 lords of the Philistines and all kinds of the aristocrats of the Philistines in the temple when he destroyed it, remember, this would have probably just happened within the past 10 to 20 years. Okay? How are the Philistines strengthened up again and beating them again? And the answer, I believe, is that all the Philistines that Samson overthrew in Crete, and the Danites and Samson overthrew in Crete and Cyprus, have now been fully kicked out, and they are now back in Philistia. That would be my guess. So it says, so the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated. Every man fled to his tent, and the slaughter was very great. And there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. So we just lost 4,000. Now we just lost another 30,000. We are not doing well. And the ark of the Lord of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas died. Okay, so his two sons were in the battle. They thought they would look cool here, and nope. No, so there was something else, and I didn't read it here, but I thought that Eli and Hophni and Phinehas were raping the women. Oh, okay. So this, I must have forgot to read this part. So So it talks about them taking the meat by force, and then it says, "Thus the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, and the men despised the offering of the Lord. Now Samuel was ministering before the Lord as a boy was wearing a linen ephod, and his mother would make him a little robe and bring it to him year by year when he would come up and sacrifice to offer the yearly sacrifice." I always think of that, and I'm just like, oh, that's so cute. You got this little 5-year-old kid, and she's like, "I brought you a little new outfit to wear." And he's like a little priestly looking garment for you, so you can play like you're like a little priest helper. Isn't that cute? Anyways, then Eli would bless Elkanah's wife and say, "May the Lord give you children from this woman in the place where she dedicated to the Lord," and they went to their own home. And then it talks about the sons he had. Okay. Now Eli was very old, and he heard that all the sons of doing with Israel, how they lay with the women who served at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things?" Okay. So I don't know if they're raping him or they're just sleeping with him. But remember, there are people who give up their daughters as virgins to serve in the temple, like Jephthah did. Okay? But there are people who probably do that, just like you have with nuns in the future, doing that as a means of, hey, here's this daughter, nobody wants to marry her, I can't afford her, just like you have in poor countries, people giving up their daughters for prostitution and stuff like that if they can't afford to take care of them. You're going to have people giving them up to the priesthood, so they're going to serve in the priesthood and do chores and stuff like that, and that's how they get their food. Okay, so they're basically on welfare. They're basically given over to an orphanage, kind of. While they're taking those women, they're sleeping with them. They're taking advantage of their position, and they're banging the young ladies, and that's not cool at all. So these guys are super wicked. They're not just eating God's snacks. Like, they are taking advantage of the poor young virgin women among them. Okay? And they're the high priest's son, so if they want to give him crap, be like, "Oh, you're going to barely eat for the next 6 months then." They can do like that. Okay? So there is no shortage to how wicked they are and how obviously Eli knows about it. Okay? So the ark was taken. 30,000 Israelites are dead. And Hophni and Phinehas are dead. And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army. He came to Shiloh that same day with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And he came and when he came, lo, Eli was on a seat by the wayside watching. So he's waiting for the people to come back from the battle, just kind of uphill, watching the battle, seeing what's going on. For his heart trembled for the ark of God, and he's worried about the ark of God. Like, you should be worried about your own eternal soul, dude, but you're worried about the box, okay? And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. And Eli heard the noise of the crying. He said, "What means the noise of the tumult?" And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Now, Eli was 98 years old. This guy's pushing 100. He is old, okay? And he's about to have his line cut off forever. So God's like, I'm going to let you live. I'm going to let you live a minute because you're going to hell after this, okay? Forever. And his eyes were dim so that he could not see. And the man said to Eli, "I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army." And he said, "What is there done, my son?" And the messenger answered and said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been also a great slaughter among the people, and thy 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken." This is bad news for Israel, okay? This is the worst. They've been oppressed by their enemies before, but they've never had the ark taken. They've never had it handed to them to that degree, nor have they ever been put under subjugation to that degree, okay? And it came to pass when he made mention of the ark of God that he fell off his seat backwards, an old fat man, and his neck broke, and he died, for he was an old man and heavy. And he judged Israel 40 years. So this is how we know, okay? He judged Israel for 40 years. He's 98. He's 50-something or older when when it says he's an old man when Samuel is presented to him, okay? And so Samuel's a little kid, and it says he's an old man. You wouldn't typically call a man in his 50s an old man, okay? So he's judged Israel 40 years, so that's where you're going to get Samuel is probably in his 30s, maybe mid-30s oldest, okay? I put 37 in there. That just works with the timelines of everything else the way I have it, so it's just a theory, so I'm spitballing there. But that would be around how old Jesus is when he dies too. Okay, so that's just really interesting. But anyways, The daughter-in-law, and his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark was taken, and that the father-in-law of her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, for the pains came upon her. Now it's interesting. Remember, Samson is a kind of a type of Antichrist. Samuel is kind of a type of Christ. He's around the age that Christ is going to die and rise again. When you see Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas die, okay? I want you to pay attention. 3 shepherds, okay? So what does Zechariah say? He says, 3 shepherds I cut off in 1 month. And of course, he's talking about the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herod, okay? He cuts them off from Israel. And basically, you're going to see the line of Herod go away. You're going to see the line of the priesthood go away. And then the Pharisees are going to continue, but not in Israel. They're not going to have authority over the church. He's going to give their authority to the apostles, okay? So you see these 3 shepherds cut off. You see these 3 priests cut off around the age that Jesus was during his death and resurrection. And then you see a new priesthood established because the line of Phinehas is cut off all the way back to Phinehas. Okay? So when we get to, we're going to look at Second Chronicles when they record this. We have, I think it's Second Chronicles 6. Nope. Or First Chronicles. So when we go to First Chronicles 6, and we look at the priesthood, it's going to go to Phinehas, and then it's going to go to Abishua. Abishua begot Buki. Buki begot Uzi. Uzi begot Zariah. Zariah begot Marioth. Marioth begot Amariah. Amariah begot Ahitub. Ahitub begot Zadok, who's around with David. And then Zadok's grandson Johanan is in the high priest's office during once the temple is built. Okay, so he cuts it off all the way back. All the way back. Remember how Phinehas, it's going to be his son. I mean, you're going to have 400 years of priests. It's going to be cut all the way back. And this guy, who's been the high priest for 40 years, is gone. You don't see any record of him. You don't see any record of his sons. You don't see any record of his dad. Nothing. He's gone from the priesthood. And then this priesthood is going to lead to Zadok too. And Ezra is not the high priest. He is a scribe and a priest, but he is descended from this same line of Zadok too. Okay, and then it's going to go to Jehozadak, and then when they come out, it's going to be Joshua the priest, and Joshua the priest is who they is like a foretype of Christ. Okay, so it's kind of like a restored priesthood after the priesthood is destroyed. Okay, so we see these foretypings of the priesthood being destroyed and replaced with a new priesthood. Okay, and that is ultimately going to have its final fulfillment in the Melchizedek priesthood, which is Christ, who is both of David and of Levi, and he is going to swallow the whole thing, both priest and king. Okay, so he is dead, and his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, remember Hophni and Phinehas, was with child near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings the ark of God was taken, that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, and pains came upon her. Okay, so she starts giving birth immediately, probably prematurely from the stress, because her husband's dead. The guy who would be the next in line, Levirate, whatever, to take care of her is dead. The high priest is dead, who would take care of her. Everybody who would potentially take care of her is dead, and she's got a baby now coming. And about the time of her death, the woman that stood by her said, "Fear not, for thou hast borne a son." And she answered not, nor did she regard it. So notice it said, so she's going to die giving childbirth about the time of her death, okay? And she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband." And she said, "The glory of God is departed from Israel, for the ark is taken." So she dies giving childbirth. So when he says he's going to wipe all of his house except for one man, he is being mysterious, okay? She dies giving childbirth. Here's the last one, and he's going to die young, okay? His name is Ichabod Crane. So The Philistines took the ark of the God and brought it to Ebenezer, from Ebenezer to Ashdod. So Ebenezer is apparently the rock they had it on. And the Philistines took the ark of God, and they brought it in the house of Dagon. They set it by Dagon. And when they of Ashdod arose early in the morrow, behold, Dagon is fallen on the face to the earth before the ark of God. And they took Dagon and set him again in his place again. Why are these guys worshiping Dagon when they're an Egyptian tribe? My guess would be the Philistines at this time are also sailing all over like the Danites. And they have people in Cyprus, which is kind of surrounded by the Arameans and the Hittites. And Dagon is worshipped among them. There's been these rumors that Dagon, you're probably going to hear this from one of the many false things that are in Bishop's The Two Babylons, but they want to make Dagon out to look like he's a fish god. There's really no evidence that Dagon is a fish god. Dagon is more likely an Aramaean version of the storm god, I believe. So he's kind of like a Baal, Zeus, Hadad among the Sumerians, and ultimately Thor and those guys. Okay. He is, let's see, Ugaritic. He is Phoenician. They know him. He's worshipped in ancient Syria across the middle of the Euphrates. Primary temples in Tutul and Turka. So these are Syrian cities. And these Mari people are going to be probably an Aramaean people who are kind of between Mesopotamia and Israel. So think the region of Syria, this side of the Euphrates, before Israel has taken it, okay? And that's where Dagon is worshipped. And then we know the Philistines and Ashdod and Gaza seem to pick him up from them. But he is a weather god, so he's another storm and weather god, okay? Obviously, if you're sailing all the time, a good weather god might be something you want in your favor. So he's closer to, remember, Zeus is not really a god yet, okay? Zeus seems to be a king of Crete who has not really become a famous god yet, okay? This would have just happened. Baal, the stuff about Baal and the bull of heaven from Ashtaroth, which is Moloch, same, this bull guy, those are going to be merged with Dagon, it seems like, and all those myths and legends of all those gods are going to be incorporated into the Zeus myth in the upcoming centuries, but that hasn't really arrived yet, okay? So what that we know of, I want to see if we've got Dagon images. So this is an image of him falling before them. I don't know why we have these ideas of him, because these are not. These ideas of him as a fish god seems more like a Poseidon than a Zeus, if you will. So we do have a Babylonian god, Oannes, who was a fish god, and that seems to be where people assume that that's Dagon. And I think they just assume that because the Philistines are seafaring. But this is where people are going to compare the Pope's hat with the fish head of this god. And no, the Pope's hat is not meant to look like the fish head of the god. I'll tell you who it's meant to look like is the Pharaoh. So if you look at the Pope's red hat, white hat, you see how you've got the red hat in the back and the white hat in the front? And people are going to say, well, that's the fish hat. Well, and you've got the Pharaoh with the white hat and the red hat, right? One is Upper Egypt, one is Lower Egypt, but that's Pharaoh, who's like a god man. Okay, so don't get me wrong, their hat seems kind of pagan, I don't know if it's meant to reflect a fish guy. Maybe it is. I doubt it. He wears funny hats. I think it's just supposed to be like some priestly crown thing that's probably common. I doubt that it's based on that. Nor is Dagon a fish god, okay? Dagon, again, he's going to be closer to like Baal or I'm trying to think who else was around in that time. So they actually say Dagon, after he discovered grain in the plow, was called Zeus Erotius. So they do associate him with Zeus. And he's associated with Baal. El, which is supposed to be God the Father, or Enlil, as they're going to call him in Sumeria, is considered the father of Baal. Because remember, Baal is based around Yahweh, the storm god, and they apparently see him as a son of God. Like this Lord, this God of the storm who appears to Job, seems to be a son of God. So remember, Job is talking to a couple of Arameans, and whoever Dagon is probably after the Tower of Babel, their conflated language version, whatever it means, that relates to whoever became Baal and became Dagon. These are just different language versions. And Hadad are different language versions of the same thing. And if you probably trace them to etymological roots, they're probably all descriptives of what the Lord reveals his name as is Yahweh. Okay? And so they're taking that and they're adding myths to that and they're corrupting that, and they've got basically a mythological version of Yahweh. Okay? So they're like, well, cool. This Yahweh guy is clearly on our side, and they're going to put it in the temple of Dagon. Why? Because they're going to associate him with Dagon. Their storm god is our storm god. Okay? So it says, the Philistines took the ark of God, brought it in the house of Dagon, and set it by Dagon. And when they of Ashdod arose early in the morning, behold, Dagon was fallen on his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord, and they took Dagon and set him in his place again. So this is what you would do when you conquer an enemy people. Sometimes you will take their gods, their actual idols, and put them in the house of your gods, as basically saying, this is how pantheons start, okay? Your god is a god, but that god is subjugated to our god. Just kind of like your king is empowered by that god, but now your king is subject to us because your god is subjected to our gods, okay? So, these pantheons, eventually, if it sticks around long enough, if it's effective long enough, they're eventually going to shift and alter the myths to say, well, that's because Yahweh was the son of Dagon, okay, or something like that, right? Their god was the son of Dagon, and that's why he is, subjugated to him, because he's one of his princes, right? So anyways, it says, and when he arose early in the morning, behold, Dagon was fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both palms of his hands were cut off on the threshold. Only a stump of Dagon was left to him. So that's a big deal. I don't know the significance of that, but I'm sure there is some significance in terms of the legends having to do with Dagon, okay? His head is cut off and both of his hands are cut off. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any that came out of Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. So, in the days of Philo, this temple is still there. I think the Jews destroy it during the time of the Maccabees. This is a stronghold that stays for a while, and they don't tread on the threshold because his hands were cut off on the threshold. What does that mean? I do not know. But the hand of the Lord was very heavy on them at Ashdod, and he destroyed them and smote them with emerods. Emerods are hemorrhoids, okay? It's also a term for like boils, pustulous boils, okay? So he smote them with emerods. I'm going to show you bubonic plague. They get these big pustulous boils, okay? That's bubonic plague, okay? So they get those and then they die. It's not pleasant. They get them from rats, and those rats come on ships. Remember, the Philistines are a seafaring people. They just had a bunch of people probably migrate back from Philistia or from Crete in Cyprus, but they're a seafaring people in general, so they could have picked up this disease from any rat anywhere, and it comes into Philistia at the same time as God's judgment on them. So they start getting bubonic plague, okay? And then the men of Ashdod saw that it was so, and the ark of God Israel should not remain with us, for his hand is sore upon us and upon Dagon our God. So they said, well, what do we do? Because this is causing us to get bubonic plague. They're like, let's give it to the next town next door. That's smart. And they said, his hand is sore upon us. So they sent therefore and gathered all the lords of the Philistines unto them. And they said, what should we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they said, let the ark of the God of Israel be carried to Gath. That's brilliant. And they carried the ark of God of Israel about thither. And it was so that when they had carried it about, the hand of the Lord was great against that city, very great, and he smote the men of that city, both small and great, and they had emerods in their secret parts. Now, you see how I showed you the bubonic plague? You have these big bulbous sores in your inner thigh. So it's around their privates. So it's not just big, bulbous, painful sores. It's in their secret parts, okay? Remember, emerods is the word for hemorrhoids, okay? It's literally the etymological root of the word hemorrhoids, okay? So this is unpleasant, okay? And then they sent the ark to... so maybe it'll be happy in Ekron. How about that? Like, let's just spread the love. So they sent the ark to Ekron, and it came to pass that the ark of God came to Ekron, that the Ekronites cried out and said, they have brought the ark of God to Israel to slay us and our people. What are you doing? Like, get this crap out of here. Obviously, this does not go well. You've got your two witnesses. You have your evidence. Let's get this thing out of here. So they said they wanted to test it, but it's really cool looking. We want to keep it. We just got to find a place where it's happy. So they sent and gathered together the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of God and let it go down again to its own place, that it slay us not and our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city, and the hand of God was very heavy there. And the men that died that were not smitten with emerod, okay, and the men that died not were smitten with hemorrhoids. So they either got bubonic plague, or they got a bad case of boils or possibly hemorrhoids. And the cry of the city went up for heaven. There was no preparation H back in the day, okay? These are severe hemorrhoids. Here, this is bad, okay? And the ark of the Lord was in the country of Philistines 7 months. So this is going on for a minute. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, saying, what shall we do to the ark of the Lord? Tell us wherewith we should send it. Out of here, dude. What are you doing? And they said, if you send away the ark of God of Israel, send it not empty, but in any wise return a trespass offering. Then you shall be healed, and it shall be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. Now, this is interesting. This is how the pagan priests. I want you guys to take this as a lesson. I'm kind of researching this stuff for my Serpent by the Way book. Most of these guys do is just lying and trickery. Okay, yes, they're worshiping demons, but it's not like they're getting supernatural information from demons most of the time. Most of what they do is just lying and trickery. So I want to show you an example of this. Okay. He's telling them, send away the ark of the Lord, but put a trespass offering in it, and then you shall be healed. And it shall be known to you why his hand is removed from you. Okay? He said, they say, what shall be the trespass offering that we return to him? They answered, 5 golden hemorrhoids. So somehow they're going to craft golden images of their bulbous blistery sores. I don't know how this is going to look. And then 5 golden mice. Why golden mice? Because obviously this is a disease that comes from mice or rats on ships. Okay? According to the number of the lords of the Philistines, for 1 plague was on you all and on your lords. So there's 5 lords. I want you to make 5 bulbous blistering sores and 5 golden mice and put them in it. Okay? Wherefore you shall make the images of your hemorrhoids and the images of the mice that mar the land, and you shall give their glory. So this is a plague carried by rats. Unto the God of Israel, peradventure, he will lighten his hand from off of you and from your gods and from all your land. Wherefore then, why do you harden your hearts? Hold on, let's get a. Why then do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? Remember Egypt and Pharaoh back in the day? Our cousins over there, they got it and they got it good. When they had severely dealt with them, did they not allow the people to go, and they departed? So let this ark go and depart. Now therefore, prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows in which there has never been a yoke, and hitch the cows into the cart, and take their calves home away from them. Okay? Now, I hold this whole scenario as like a prophecy about Christendom. Okay? it is obviously what happened back in the day, but I think it's also forecasting Christendom. So pay attention. It starts with them using the ark like a token. It is they lose the ark to the 5 lords of the Philistines, just like the church loses control of itself to the 5 pentarchs. Okay, very similar. Then the pentarchy is really finally broken with the bubonic plague, because you're going to have kind of a new pentarchy kind of emerge. You're going to have the Bishop of Constantinople and the Pope of Rome, but there's a schism, and then the Pope is going to start establishing his own archbishops over different places to have a new pentarchy with himself as the head. Okay, but after the bubonic plague, that power gets broken by the Reformation. Okay. And so they're no longer able to, nobody believes this whole using the ark as a token, and they don't really believe in Christendom like that anymore, okay? But I want you to pay attention to the lesson here. The Jews are going to receive it back and still be moving around the ark, which is a type of the gospel, in the way that the pagan Philistines did it. And that, I think, is kind of a foretype of the Reformation coming out of Christendom, but Christendom not coming out of the Reformation. Okay, like you can take a brother out of the hood, but you can't take a hood out of the brother, so to speak. Okay, in Catholic terms. Okay, so they're still Catholic gangsters, and these guys are basically going to copy what they're doing with the cart and the 2 milk kind as the proper way to carry it, when they should be consulting their scriptures as a proper way to carry it. What does that sound like in the Reformation? Well, they're still sharing the gospel like the Catholics did. They're still infant baptizing and conquering people like the Catholics did, even though they're separated from the Catholics after the bubonic plague. Okay? That's what I think that is. And I don't start the Reformation with Luther. I start it with Wycliffe. Wycliffe started the Reformation, not Luther. Okay? And Wycliffe was right after the bubonic plague. Okay? So, it says, take the ark of the Lord and place it in the cart, and put the articles of gold which you return to him as a guilt offering in a box by its side, and send them away that it may go. Watch, if it goes up by the way of its own territory to Beth Shemeth, then he has done us this great evil. But if not, we will know that it is not by his hand that he struck us, that it happened to us by chance. So listen to this. He's saying, thus saith the Lord to them, right? You need to put these hemorrhoids in the box. You need to put the golden mice in a box. You need to send it on a new cart with 2 milk kind that never had milk, and send it away, okay? And he's saying, that's what the Lord wants you to do to get rid of this plague. But, and he's saying, if it goes away and these by themselves, these milk kind don't stick around, they don't wander away, they go up to Beth Shemeth and into basically Israeli territory, then we'll know it was the hand of the Lord that struck us. If not, it happened by chance. We just happened to catch a plague. Okay? See how they equivocate. They tell you, thus saith the Lord, here's what you want to do. But maybe it was just chance. So it's almost like they're doing this test to say this is what happened. Okay? They don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to figure this out. So God is apparently just like, I just wanted my stuff back. Thanks for the golden hemorrhoids and the mice. I'll give them to the kids to play with, but that's weird. Okay? And then the men did so, and they took 2 milk cows, hitched them in the cart, and shut up their calves at home. They put the ark of the Lord in the cart, and the box with the golden mice and the likeness of the tumors. And the cows took the straight way in the direction of Bethshemesh, and they went along the highway, lowing as they went. They did not turn to the right or to the left. In other words, they just kept moving and just marching on until they get to Bethshemesh. And the lords of the Philistines followed them to the border of Bethshemesh, and now the people of Bethshemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they raised their eyes and saw the ark and were glad to see it. So where's Bethshemesh? So they walk it all the way back up to the mountains, basically, into Bethshemesh, okay? Oh, there's a couple of Bethshemesh. I'm sorry, Bethshemesh is down here. So if you remember Lehi and Zanoah as the camp where the Danites were, and Bethshemesh, or no, I think it might be Zorah and Eshtaol. It's one of those two. But it's right in this area where Samson was doing his thing. And Bethshemesh is this town it's still in the lowlands, but it's downriver from where the ark was taken from. Okay, so you probably have roads near there. So they get it out of Philistine territory, and they're like, "We're good. Let's be out." And those people there, who were possibly Danites, who knows? It says they were reaping their harvest in the valley, and they raised their eyes and saw the ark and were glad to see it. And the cart came to the field of Joshua the Beth-Shemite, and there stood there a large stone, and they split the wood of the ark and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord, and the box that was with it, and in which were the articles of gold, and put them on a large stone. And the man of Bethshemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifice that day to the Lord. So I want you to make sure you understand this. They're not just taking the same cart that the Philistines used with the same cows that the Philistines used, right? They killed those cows to sacrifice them, okay? But they like the idea. They're like, yeah, that'll preach. So when the lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned to Ekron that day, and these are the golden tumors which the Philistines returned for a guilt offering to the Lord. One for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, one for Ekron. And the golden mice, according to the numbers of all the cities of the Philistines, belonged to the 5 lords, both the fortified cities and the country village. The large stone on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua the Beth-Shemite. Okay? Notice it says, is a witness to this day. So what day is that? Well, this is Samuel, so apparently the later prophets, it's still there. Okay? He struck down some of the men, then he says this, listen to this. He struck down some of the men of Bethshemesh because they looked into the ark of the Lord, and he struck down of the people 50,070 men. And the people mourned because the Lord struck down the people with a great slaughter. I just literally bubonic plagued the Philistines to get my stuff back, and now you guys are just playing around with it like it's a kid's toy. Okay? Where was all this power when we tried to use this thing as a magic token? It's not about the magic token. It's about you fearing and honoring the Lord. What is your deal? Go consult your scriptures. So the men of Bethshemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord and God, and who shall go up from us? Okay, we need this thing out of here, okay? Nobody's reading the Bible. Maybe somebody should consult the priest or Lord. Well, the priest is dead, remember? Remember, he was there 7 months. The priest and his sons are dead. They're in the midst of probably trying to figure out who the priest should be. And right now, the priest is kind of new at his job. Nobody really knows what they're doing. We've had some trouble. We've got this Samuel guy who's kind of prophet-like. Maybe we should consult him. Nobody's thinking here. Nobody's just like, hey, let's just see if this works. Okay? So they sent messengers to the habits of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you. He killed 50,070 men. That cannot be right. There's got to be some other versions, because 50,000 men in one village is not. This is 70 men. The NRSV says 70 men. The King James says, let's see, 50,000. It's probably 53 score and 10. 50,000 3 score and 10. Like there's 50,000 men in this one little town? No way. No way is this the number. So, King James Onlyist, tell me about this one. He just went to war with the Philistines, and then they lost 4,000. And then they went to, where did they go? Then they lost a bigger battle, and they lost like 30,000. Now you're going to say there's 50,000 people chilling in this one town? No. It says Shama Shiam 50. This Ella says the same, hence the ox's head being the first letter of the alphabet, and this is eventually used as a numeral, 1,000. 73 score and 10 men. I doubt it. NASB is going to say 50,070 men. NRSV is going to say 70 men. So they're close, just a difference of 50,000 people. I'm going to guess it's probably not 70 or 50,000. I don't know why these guys don't just work together and come up with a better idea than 70 men and 50,000 men. 50,000 and 70 men in this one. There's just not a town, even in the time of Christ, there's just not Maybe Jerusalem has that many people when it's the capital, but you got to remember the whole population of Israel is like 2 million. Like there's 50,000 in this one town. No way. No way. I don't understand. So whatever that is, that needs some scholarly work to figure out what the real number is. It's obviously probably not 70 men. Could be, but 50,000, 70, those numbers, those symbols mean something. And I'm guessing there's an error there. But anyways, he says, the men of Bethshemesh said, who will stand before the Lord your God, and whom shall go up for us? And they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath-Jearim and said, get this thing out of here. It's just the what do they call it? The giving tree, or whatever. This thing, just wherever it goes, it brings blessings. We need this thing out. And the men of Kiriath-Jearim came and fetched the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abinadab on a hill, and sacrificed Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. This box has brought death and destruction everywhere it has gone for the past year, okay? And it came to pass that the ark abode in Kiriath-Jearim, and the time was long, for it was 20 years. 20 years this ark stayed there. And all the house of Israel lamented before the Lord, okay? So it's there another 20 years. Remember, Samuel's coming of age now. When the other dude died, he was probably in his 30s. He is probably in his 50s now. He's like, oh, you guys want to know about this ark thing, huh? It's been chilling here for 20 years now. That they're just lamenting. They're losing their battles. The ark's chilling. So this is not a small period of time. I want you to understand. This is just, what is going on here? I mean, they sacrificed the things, and they did the stuff, and they said, yeah, this is pretty cool. Let's make this rock something. Let's call it something. So they call the stone Abel. And the men of Kiriath-Jearim are like, we'll do it. Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be in the days of David when they try to take this thing up again. And they put it on a cart just like the Philistines do. So years later, 60 years later, they're still fiddling around with this thing and can't figure out how to not get people killed. Just moving this ark around when they've got a book that tells you how to carry it. They've got a book that says you put these poles and you put it on the Levite's back. That's how you carry this thing. And they don't look at it. Don't mess with it. It's not a toy. Just carry it around all sacred, like covered up, and put it in the tabernacle. I've like the book says, nobody's reading their Bible. It's just like today. It's kind of like you have a bunch of people who are like, we're going to revolt against the Catholic Church, so are we going to read our Bible and do everything it says? Well, not everything it says, just enough to leave the Catholic Church and still be just like the Catholic Church. And that's where you get Protestants and Calvinists, and Lutherans and everyone pretty much but Anabaptists. And eventually it's going to get better because people are going to read the Bible more and more, but they're still fiddling around with what the gospel is years and years and years later, just like these guys are still fiddling around with how to carry this ark and not get killed years and years and years later, okay? And at the end of it, as they're on their way to get it to Jerusalem, they're still doing it stupid. And this guy, Ahio, whose name means strength, because they're doing it by their own strength, he dies. And this other guy, whose name means brother, this is Church Philadelphia, these guys are like, okay, maybe we should do this the right way, because he's the guy who remains standing after this guy dies. And he tells David, and David's just like, oh, Lord, what do we do? They don't get the ark for a while. And then eventually they figure out how to get it there. And by that time, David's running around naked. Okay? And all this stuff has to do with the consummation of the wedding, because it's all foretyping the whole church history. The whole of church history, it's foretyping. Okay? It's pretty awesome. So, it came to pass that the ark woke in the Kiriath-Jearim for another 20 years, and Samuel spoke to the house of Israel, saying, If you do return to the Lord with all your hearts, maybe it's time we consult somebody who everybody doesn't know is wicked. Because Ophni and Phinehas, everybody knows these guys are wicked. They're sleeping with the virgins, and they're not virgins anymore, and they're taking the good pieces of the meat. And the Samuel guy, we know he's got the word of the Lord. Maybe it's time we ask him instead of people who are clearly not good guys. And he says, if you will get rid of your strange gods and Ashtaroth, the woman who made the Nephilim, from among you, and prepare your hearts in the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand. He'll deliver you out of the hands of your Philistines. Really? No, there's got to be some magic formula we got to do. You're saying if we just do what God says, he'll do what he said he would do if we do what he said? Yes, says Samuel. It's like that. Hold on. I'm getting a prophetic word. Yeah, do what God tells you to do and you won't die. Thus saith the Lord. Then the children of Israel did put away the Balaam and Asherah and serve the Lord only. It makes me wonder if when they say put away, if they're just like, well, we'll take these off the shelf and put them in our hope chest. Like they're going to get them out later again. Like, these ones are out of season. Doesn't say they destroyed them. They took away the Balaam and the Ashtaroth, and of course Balaam is plural, so the Baals, okay? There are different versions of Baal. Just like there are different versions of Zeus and Ammon among the... Ammon and Zeus are pretty much the same thing in Egypt and Greece, okay? They're going to say Zeus this, Zeus that. They're going to be like... It becomes a generic word for God in times, okay? So the Baalim are the lords, okay? The lord of this, the lord of that. The patron saint of this, the patron saint of that. Yes, the Catholics are following paganism, okay? And then they're eventually Baal's a generic word for God, but also the gods that are under him kind of thing. And that's why I think there's association. I'm not positive, because I know the word Deus, I've heard that the word Deus and Zeus are related, okay? If that is the case, then the Greek, when Paul is citing Greek poets talking about Zeus, that's a former version of the word that becomes Deus or Theos, which Paul would basically just generically be saying God when he's quoting those Greek poets. And saying what those Greek poets are saying about God is correct, because Zeus is just a generic word for God at that time. Just like your Christian Bibles are going to have Allah in them if they're in Arabic, but Allah is definitely not the God of the Bible. Right? It becomes a generic word for God after time. And you will find a reference in, we'll get to it eventually in 2 Kings, where they use Baal as a reference to the legitimate God of Israel, okay? So anyways, Samuel said, gather all of Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray for you there unto the Lord. And they gathered together to Mizpah and drew water and poured it out before the Lord and fasted on that day and said there, we have sinned before the Lord. And Samuel judged the children of Israel at Mizpah. So now Samuel is stepping up. This is like 20 years after, it seems like, or maybe it's just right after, but the ark is just there for the next 20 years, okay? But he's like, okay, I will judge you guys, okay? Gather them all to Mizpah, and now he's starting to judge Israel. And he is approaching, if it's before or after this 20 years, he's either a middle-aged man or he's like a man in his 30s, okay? And he says, when the Philistines heard the children of Israel gathered together at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the children of Israel heard it, they were afraid of the Philistines. And the children of Israel said to Samuel, cease not to cry unto the Lord our God for us, for he will save us out of the hand of the Philistines. Sure will. And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered a burnt offering wholly unto the Lord. And Samuel cried unto the Lord for Israel, and all the Lord heard him. And Samuel was offering the burnt offering. The Philistines drew near to the battle of Israel. But the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines, and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. And the men of Israel went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and smote them until they came under Bethkar, which is just another city down there. Samuel took a stone and set it between Mizpah and Shen, and called it Ebenezer, saying, hitherto has the Lord helped us. Okay? So Ebenezer is kind of like a rock of remembrance, but supposedly this is where the ark was in a place called Ebenezer. So I don't know if there's multiple places like this, or this is the story of how Ebenezer got its name. I don't know. Maybe. So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the coast of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. And the cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel and restored to Israel from Ekron unto Gath, and the coast thereof, did Israel deliver to the hands of the Philistine, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Okay? So the Amorites are the main people of the Philistines that remain, or the Canaanites that remain in the land. They're not given any guff in the days of Samuel, and the Philistines aren't giving them any guff. And they took back the cities of Ekron and Gath. That's a big deal. Okay, so the five lords of the Philistines, Ekron and Gath, were cities that they would rule. So you see Ekron and Gath, but these are cities. Remember, you're going to have these cities on the coastline, and then these cities that are in the plains. Okay, so they now have. It's been a minute. You remember the Danites were not doing so hot, right? The Danites are going to be up Lehi and Zanoah. This is where they are, but now they have taken up to Ekron and Gath. Okay, Timnah, if you remember, that's where Samson gets his whole wife. So I would expect that the Danites are then going to expand down here, and they're probably going to from there then eventually get hold of Joppa and start doing their thing. Okay. So the Danites, don't think the Danites are entirely gone from Israel or they're entirely up in that northern city. You still have Danites down here, and these Danites are going to kind of be in this plains region, in partially in the territory of Dan, but kind of in between the Philistines. Remember, the Philistines are now kind of weakened, and these Danites are going to serve in the army of David. Probably some of the Danites from the city up north too. They are not all gone away. And then these Danites are going to leave when the kingdom splits and go to Ethiopia. Okay, why Ethiopia? I do not know. Okay, but there's going to be some crazy serpent cult and weird stuff going on down there. Okay, they're not the best people. So Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he went from year to year in a circuit from Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah, and he judged Israel in all those places, Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah. So let's see, Bethel. So Bethel, Mizpah, and where's Gilgal? Gilgal's down here. So this is his route. So Gilgal, he's probably going down there to judge the guys who are on the other side of the Jordan. You know, that's for them. That's for northern Israel, is Bethel, and then Mizpah is probably for Judah and Simeon and the people down here, okay? So he's probably beating these same places, and these guys go to meet him there, and that's where he adjudicates cases and disputes between peoples and the tribes that are too big for the locals to handle. Okay? Or things having to do with what's the word of the Lord on this? Should we go to war and fight and do this or what? Okay? He's kind of serving in the capacity that the high priest would serve. Remember, the high priest has been wiped out. They might have another guy who is ready to go, or they might be raising somebody up to do it. It's not crystal clear what's going down here. But we do know it's eventually going to get replaced with the priesthood of Zadok, and we know there's a priest around in Saul's day because they do the Urim and Thummim thing. But you might have a period where they don't really have a priest. I mean, the ark's not in the tabernacle. Nobody seems to be knowing what's going on, and Samuel is just judging as he sees fit. Might be. He's a Korite. He's definitely not a priest. We don't know who's the high priest right now. And then he says, and his return was to Ramah, for there was his house, so that's where he lived, and he judged Israel, and he built an altar unto the Lord. So he's not just judging Israel, he's built an altar unto the Lord, and he's carrying out sacrifices. So it does seem like he's kind of acting as an intercessor in the place of the priesthood for a minute. Okay? So it says, it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. And the name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second is Abijah, and they were judges in Beersheba. So remember, from Dan to Beersheba. So Beersheba is going to be in Simeon, so he's probably having them take care of Judah for him. And he says his sons walked not in his ways, and turned aside after lucre, and took bribes and perverted judgment. So these guys, his sons, are not good either. And he is taking a cue from Eli, apparently, and not punishing them because he's smart. And his sons did not walk in the ways and turned aside after dishonest gain, and took bribes and perverted justice. And when he finds out about it, he's just like, hey, have I taken anything from you? And he's like, you know how people are kind of responsible for their sons, and you know how you delegated their authority, right? So it is your problem, Samuel. Okay? I don't know why they don't deal with that. They're just like, they want a king. They've had it. So his sons, all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, behold, you have grown, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. And the thing was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us, and Samuel prayed to the Lord. Now remember, in Deuteronomy, Moses is already telling him there's a time coming when they're going to prophesy a king, okay? By the time we get to Ezra, we know that they're going to give reference to this and talk about how Solomon sinned when he did this. Okay, there are going to be people who are going to say Deuteronomy was written in the Second Temple period. Blah blah bull crap. Okay, it's a book of Moses. Moses is telling him all this stuff, and he's prophesying you guys are going to have a king. Make sure the king doesn't do all this stuff, and it's literally all the stuff that Solomon does. Okay, it's almost like he's telling him, he's prophesying Solomon and their downfall. And the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Okay? I want you to pay attention when people are just like, oh, the Jews are so awesome and they're so good, and we need to learn everything from them. Okay? They have a pattern of not doing what God says, not keeping track of his word so well. So I'm not too keen on their particulars on how to keep the holy feast that I'm not commanded to keep as a Christian. Okay? They've rejected me from being king over them, like all the deeds that they have done since the day I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, and that they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. He's saying, you're a Christ type, Samuel. You're a prophet. And they're doing you like they did me. They've always done me like this. They rejected me from being their God when I tried to talk to them in the first place and said, give us the law instead. Now they're rejecting me from being king and saying, give us a human king instead. Okay? So give us a law from a prophet instead, and give us a king to tell us what to do instead. We don't want a relationship with you, God. Now, to be fair, they are saying... Divinely inspired text is saying that his sons are taking bribes, and they never really deal with that issue. They just want a king. Okay? Now, instead of just giving him... They don't seem to be giving him an opportunity to correct his sons. Okay? They are like, we just want you people out. Well, keep in mind, they've had a history of having a good judge followed by his crappy kids. Okay? So, they're not necessarily looking to keep playing this game. But they're not that great either, so don't think they are. So he says, listen to their voice, however you shall solemnly, so in other words, do what they tell you, however you shall solemnly warn them and tell them of the procedure of the king who shall reign over them. So God is going to tell them, here's what the king gets to do. This is how, you want a king like the other nations, this is what the kings in the other nations do. You think tithing was bad, now you've just doubled your taxes, okay? Because you used to have a God who can just kill everybody with an angel. Now you want a king who needs to raise an army. So how's it going to go? So Samuel spoke all the words of the Lord to the people who had asked him of him a king, and he said, this will be the produce of the king, or the procedure of the king who will reign over you. He will take all your sons and your daughters and place them for himself in his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. In other words, he's going to have a draft. He's going to have a standing army, and he's going to take of your sons and be like, you are now in my standing army. So there. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and fifties, and some will do his plowing and reap his harvest and make his weapons of war and equipment for chariots. So he's going to take you guys to plow. Remember, he's doing king stuff now. He can't just take care of his fields. So he's going to have people taking care of his fields. He's going to have people making equipment for him. He's got to get some blacksmith. He's got to have some regular armor. He needs a standing army. This is how it's going to go down. He will take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. He's got to have servants. He's a king. You want a king like other nations. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He's got to have good eats. He's going to have diplomatic meetings and stuff. He will take a tenth of your seed and of your vineyards and give them to his officers and his servants. Remember, we're going to double the tithe now. He will take of your male servants and your female servants and your best young men and your donkeys to use them for his work. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his servants. Then you will cry out in that day because the king which you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. So he's warning them. If you want a king, this is how it's going to go down. He's warning them, and they said, nevertheless, there shall be a king over us. We want it. All right. Remember how you guys wanted this law thing, and it's not been good for you ever since. You've struggled with the particulars of this bilateral covenant for now a good half a millennium. Are you sure you want things to go better when you decide what the ground rules are? And they're like, yup, the problem is not with us, the problem is with you, God. Just let us have more control and it will be even better. All right. And we'll be like other nations, that our king may judge over us and go out to fight before us in our battles. Are you saying you want apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, and evangelists? No, we want one stage performer that just tells us stuff and makes us feel good, and we just want a big a rock show as possible. You don't want elders and church discipline and stuff? Nope, we got this. We know how to spread the gospel, okay? We don't need to hear about your spiritual gifts and your holiness and your church discipline and purity. Just give us fog machines and lasers and lights, and we will finesse everybody into the kingdom of God, all right? We got this. All right. Well, let's see how that works out for you. How's it working out for you in a generation? Well, there's trannies running around everywhere, and Christians are all but being thrown in jail for being Christians. But we still got this, okay? Just more of the same. We just need bigger churches with shorter sermons and better rock shows. All right. Well, you just let me know if you need me for anything, because I'm standing at the door knocking. I'm just going to chill out here, and you let me know if you need anything, thus saith the Lord. And he says, okay, we'll get a king like the nations around us, okay? Like the cult of Hollywood around us, like the cult of rock and roll around us, we will get a pastor for us, like the world around us. And, well, that's going to be really expensive. It's going to cost you a lot of money to build a mega stadium and keep up a rock band and all that stuff. It's going to cost you a lot more than if you guys just gave what's purpose on your heart for the purpose of spreading the gospel, and make sure you always have, some elders that get something for their service, that check up on you guys and host Bible studies and stuff like that, and a pastor who teaches the Word of God faithfully, and guys that are going to execute church discipline when you guys sin until people repent, and people who are going to counsel you and help take care of the poor among you. Trust me, it's going to be a lot more expensive with a lot worse results if you have a king instead of a body of elders. And Israel's literally going from a king instead of a body of elders, and it's megachurch time, right? And this is what you literally had Mark Driscoll talking about. Well, there's king type, priest type, and prophet type pastors, and I'm a king type. And it's like, no, there's not, you idiot. You literally have these guys like the bait of Satan there comparing their pastor to a king and saying, David didn't touch Saul's anointed because it's like me. I'm a king. I'm God's anointed, and you can't touch me even if I'm sinning and sleeping around and scamming your money. You want a king like other nations? You can have your mega church pastor like other nations. Okay? You want it to be like Hollywood and AC/DC? You can have it. Okay? Let me know how that works out for you. Call me if you need me. And there was a son of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abdiel, the son of Zeror. Oh, I'm sorry. We're done here. We're gonna pick up with Paul another time, okay? Because he's gonna give him someone who is tall, good looking, and everything. Their flesh says, man, this is like you just like smushed like Brangelina into one person and was just like, here's your pastor. Somewhat masculine, somewhat feminine, very pretty, and talks good. There you go. How do you like it? He's got jokes. He's got TED Talk smoothiality in his talking points, and he just makes you get the feels when you listen to him, and you go away going, what was he talking about? He was awesome, man. You just have to be there. Like, what did he talk about though? Like, what Bible passages did he teach on? Dude, you just got to check him out. He is such a good teacher. He's such a good teacher. I heard this about Rob Bell and so many people. He's such a good teacher. What did he teach you about? You just got to listen to him, man. He's just such a good teacher. He makes me feel so good. And the music is just awesome. The music just makes me just like swoon and feeling it. Oh, I'm feeling it. And I'm just like, And what was the song about? What was the lyrics? God and some anthems and stuff. What? Welcome to America, okay? We're heading towards Laodicea, okay? And it's not going to get fixed until David gets the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and this is all leading up to the gospel completing its course and then it's kind of like a foretype of the rapture in the end of the gospel period, okay, by the time we get to David in Jerusalem, okay? So I'm going to keep those talking points up as I go. This is just some stuff I was working on. And that's it. I'm going to try to, again, this is 1 Samuel. We've got 7. We've got 9. They're going to start from 9 to Saul's reign is going to end in 31. So I'm going to probably break that up into 2 pieces. Probably break it up from the point until David is selected and then his persecution of David unto his death. And try to break that up into 2 points. And that's going to somehow be another 24 chapters, so like 12 chapters per. Okay? And then we're going to be into David's reign, and it's going to take me a while to get through that because David does a lot of crazy stuff. And then we're going to be in 1 Kings, and we're just going to keep going on this track. And like I said, I'm going to take probably a break on my other weekly broadcast here, and I am going to give you kind of an eschatological review and update. And then I'm going to continue on with the Apocrypha and get into why some of them are okay, but definitely not scripture, and other ones are horrible and definitely setting you up to be led by a false mystery cult. Some of them are very clearly that, including stuff that was published in the King James. Okay, so there's stuff in the King James that even the Catholics wouldn't affirm and put in their Bibles, and King James did. So that's it. So that's introduction to, we're done with the Judges. The period of the Judges is over, and we are now beginning the period of the Kings. And like I said, 1st and 2nd Samuel used to be called 1st and 2nd Kings. 1st and 2nd Kings used to be called 3rd and 4th Kings. So there used to be 4 books of the Kings, but these books are really about the prophets and the kings, okay? So you want to consider these books, and then when we get into 2nd Kings, that's when your prophets, Isaiah, Hosea, on down, are going to be read into that. So I'm going to be taking big breaks in Hosea and Isaiah and stuff like that and reading through the prophets with you guys, okay? Now, I'm not going to stop and do all the Psalms. I'll probably do the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes when I'm doing Solomon, but I'm not going to stop and do all the Psalms because there's just way too many. I might do that as its own thing, as I'm just an old, scrubby old man and just like trying to work on my junk as I'm, recorded everything I care to and dumped out all my knowledge and can barely remember anything anymore. And then I'll just go through the Psalms one at a time and just be like, and this makes me cry too because I realize how many things I've done wrong. And then we'll all die in death camps by that time, hopefully. And Jesus will be here. So we'll be good. So I hope you guys are blessed by this. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Remember, we're all going to die, and it's going to happen soon. But don't worry, we're going to starve and get really poor first. And you guys be blessed. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.